I had just finished reviewing the quarterly numbers from my chain of auto repair shops when my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. Just another Tuesday, just another interruption. But then my secretary popped in and said, "It's Grace from Elegant Events. She says it's urgent." The name didn't ring a bell at first. I almost waved it off. I wasn't planning any parties. I wasn't getting married. Then it clicked. Nathan. My younger brother was getting married in a month, and Grace must have been the wedding planner. I had quietly wired over $48,000 for the deposit. Nathan and his fiancée were strapped, and Mom had asked me to help. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I never do. I picked up the call. "Hi, this is Marcus," I said. Grace sounded nervous. "Hi, Mr. Taylor. I'm sorry to call you directly, but something's come up, and I thought you should hear it from me." That's never a good sign. She hesitated, then rushed through it. "Nathan's future in-laws contacted us this morning. They have requested that we remove you from the guest list due to family disagreements." I blinked. "I'm sorry. They what?" "They asked that your name be taken off the RSVP list. They said it would be simpler that way. And they also asked that the deposit remain with the event." I sat back in my chair. For a second, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were uninviting me from a wedding I financed. "Grace," I said slowly, "are you telling me that I paid nearly 50 grand to be cut out of my own brother's wedding?" She stammered. I didn't know how else to tell you. I thought you were involved." I let out a short, bitter laugh. Apparently not. It wasn't even about the money. I could have eaten the loss. What burned was the assumption that I was still the screw-up. The kid who used to borrow rent money, the brother who couldn't get his act together. They still saw me that way. They hadn't noticed that I now owned 3 of the vendors listed on the wedding brochure they bragged about. They thought they could cut me out quietly and still ride the wave of my money. They had no idea who they were messing with. "Thank you for letting me know, Grace," I said, my voice calm but clipped. "I'll be in touch." Then I ended the call and stared at the wall. They thought I was still that guy. That was their first mistake. The morning after Grace's call, I didn't even wait for my second cup of coffee. I called her directly. She picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Taylor," she started, clearly rattled. "Who owns Elegant Events?" I cut her off. There was a pause. I'm not sure what you mean. "You work for Elegant Events, right? So, who signs your paychecks?" She hesitated, then rattled off a list of shell company names and holding firms. I let her talk. I already knew where the trail led. Every entity tied back to a parent company I'd set up 3 years ago. I'd built it quietly, slowly acquiring boutique event companies under my hospitality group. Elegant Events was one of them. Grace just didn't know I was her boss. "So here's what we're going to do," I said when she finally stopped talking. "Cancel everything." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Venue, catering, photography, flowers, linens, guest shuttles, all of it. Shut it down." She sounded like she was about to choke. "Sir, the wedding is in 3 weeks. They'll never find replacements." "Not my problem," I said flatly. "But everything's been finalized. Some of the vendors, well, they're actually owned by the same group." "I know." I leaned back in my chair. "They're mine too." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. "Wait, you own?" "All of it," I said. "You don't need to verify it. Just follow the instruction. Effective immediately, cancel all services for Nathan Taylor and Laura Penner's wedding. Full stop." "Sir, what should I tell them?" "Tell them the person who was uninvited decided not to foot the bill." I let that hang in the air for a second. Then I continued. "Any deposits from guests should be refunded. Any outstanding balance from Nathan's side. You can charge that minus 48 grand as a cancellation fee. Make sure it's itemized. I want it clean." She sounded like she was spinning. I'll need to talk to legal about." "Already handled. It's a 1-line clause in the contract. If the financier is removed from the guest list, the agreement is null." She didn't say anything after that, just a quiet breath on the line. "Thank you, Grace," I added. "You've been professional." Then I hung up. I knew the calls were coming, probably before noon, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. They thought I was some washed-up dropout with greasy hands and bad credit. They had no clue they were standing on my payroll. Let's see how they handle a wedding with no chairs, no dinner, and no venue. That was their second mistake. The first call came just before noon. I didn't even look at the screen before answering. I already knew who it was. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" my father barked. "The venue just called your mother, said the wedding's off. What did you do?" I didn't flinch. I canceled everything. There was a long pause on the line, then a quieter, more confused version of his voice. "You what?" "You heard me," I said. "The venue, the catering, the shuttles, gone." "But why?" I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. "Because I was uninvited." He started to speak, then stopped. I could almost hear him rewinding through the last few days in his head. "You paid for this?" he finally asked. "All of it," I said. 48 grand up front. The rest was being handled through subsidiaries. I own every vendor you all thought you were hiring." He didn't say anything. "The venue? Mine. The catering company? Mine. Elegant Events. I acquired them last year. Even the limo service Nathan's been bragging about to his fiance's parents. That's under my umbrella, too." "You plan parties now?" he muttered, like the concept broke his brain. I almost laughed. "No. I own the people who plan them." I could feel the shift in his tone, from anger to disbelief to something like unease. "Why would you pay for all this and not tell us?" he finally said. "Because Mom called me crying 6 months ago, said Nathan needed help. I wired the money without a word. I didn't need applause." He went silent again. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. "So, you're telling me this entire wedding was built on your dime and your businesses?" "Yep. And when they kicked me off the guest list, I figured there was no point in financing a celebration I wasn't welcome at." "This is going to destroy everything," he said. Not to me. More like he was saying it to himself. "No," I corrected. "It's just revealing what was already broken." He didn't reply. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a minute, letting it settle in. The silence didn't last. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. "Nathan?" I didn't answer that one. Not yet. He'd be mad, I knew that much. But mad wasn't my problem anymore. I wasn't the same kid they used to shake their heads at. They just hadn't caught up yet. Let's see what my little brother has to say when he realizes the only thing keeping his dream wedding alive was the screw-up with the stained hands and the quiet bank account, the same one they just tried to erase from the pictures. That was their third mistake. Nathan's name lit up my screen again around 3 in the afternoon. I let it ring twice, then picked up. "What the hell are you doing, man?" he blurted before I even said hello. "Grace just called. She said everything's canceled. The venue, the catering, the cars, everything. Are you trying to ruin my wedding?" I stayed quiet for a beat, then said calmly, "No, I didn't ruin anything. You did that yourself when you decided I wasn't welcome." "What are you talking about?" he snapped. "This isn't about you. This is about the fact that Laura's parents didn't feel comfortable with you there because of past stuff. It's complicated." "It's not that complicated, Nathan," I said. "They didn't want me there, and you let them cut me out. But you were fine cashing the checks." "What checks?" he said, clearly thrown. "You didn't— Wait, what are you saying?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. "Mom called me 6 months ago, said you were short on the venue deposit. I wired $48,000 into the planner's account that night." He went silent. "You didn't know, because I didn't say anything. I didn't want credit. I just wanted to help." More silence. Then, You gave Grace that money? The deposit came from you?" "All of it. And not just the deposit. The venue, the flowers, the caterers. They're all under businesses I own. Every last piece of your wedding was handled by my companies." "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Are you serious?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Dead serious. And now that I've been officially uninvited, I pulled the plug. No invite, no wedding. "You can't just do that," he exploded. "There are guests flying in. Laura's family has been bragging about this for months." I didn't flinch. "You should have thought about that before cutting me out." He went quiet again. Then, more defensively, "Look, this wasn't my decision alone. Her parents— I don't care who made the call," I said. "You let it happen, and if you want this wedding to go forward, there's only one way." "What?" "I want a real apology. From you, from the family. And not one of those fake polite ones either. You want me involved? Then own what you did and ask me to be there. Otherwise, enjoy City Hall. You're serious. Dead serious. He didn't say anything for a long time. Think it over, I said. You've got time, but not much. Then I hung up. I knew what would happen next. The calls. The behind-the-scenes scrambling. But what they didn't have anymore was leverage. They finally saw what I'd built, and just how much of it they'd been standing on. It was just past 8 when my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Nathan. It was Laura. I considered ignoring it, but something about seeing her name on the screen gave me pause. She hadn't called before. She hadn't said a word, far as I knew, and I was curious. I picked up. Hello? Hi, Marcus, she said quietly. Her voice was soft, not the defensive tone I expected after Nathan's call. Do you have a second? Sure, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I wanted to talk to you directly, not through Nathan, not through anyone else. I didn't say anything, just waited. She took a breath. I had no idea you paid for any of this. The deposit, the vendors, all of it. I didn't know. Figured you didn't, I said. And I didn't know you owned the planning company, she added, or the catering business, or any of it, really. I just thought that I was some burnout with a bad attitude, I said, not even bitter, just stating it. There was a pause on her end. Honestly? Yeah, that's what Nathan always made it sound like. He said you were doing okay now, but that you used to be kind of unstable. I almost laughed. Unstable. That's one way to rewrite family history. I'm sorry, she said. That's not fair. I didn't know you'd built something like this. I didn't know you'd done so much for this wedding. If I had, I wouldn't have let anyone uninvite you. That's on me too. Her words were awkward, but they sounded real. She wasn't calling to spin anything. She was calling to face it. I know we messed up, she continued. I know Nathan did. He's still trying to catch up with what this means. I think we all are. Laura, I said, I didn't pull the plug to punish you. I did it because I was being used. If I'm not family enough to sit at the table, then I'm not family enough to foot the bill. That makes sense, she said. It does. But if there's a way to make it right, I want to try. We want you there. Not because of the money, because we were wrong. I leaned back in my chair and let that sink in. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I can ask. We hung up after that. No big promises, no emotional theatrics, just the first crack in the wall. She had looked past the assumptions and finally seen the person standing on the other side. The next morning started with a call from Grace. Mr. Taylor, she said carefully. They've agreed to your terms. I didn't respond right away. I was sitting in my office, sipping coffee, watching the light spill across the floor. I let the silence stretch. They've wired a new deposit, $190,000, she added. It's for one of your premium venues, the smallest one available this close to the date. I nodded slowly. Good. Let's make sure everything's in motion. But this time, they get what they pay for. No upgrades, no special favors. Understood, she said. Before she could hang up, I added, and Grace, keep it professional. No side favors, no courtesy discounts. Full price across the board. Absolutely, she said, then hung up. I sat there for a minute longer, letting it settle in. They had caved. That didn't surprise me. What did surprise me came an hour later when I got a text from Mom. Mom, we want to meet, in person, all of us. I stared at the screen for a second, then another message came in, this time from Nathan. Nathan, we talked about everything last night. I want to apologize properly. And, if it's not too late, I'd really like you to be my best man. That part hit a little harder than I expected. Not because of the words, but because of what it meant. He was finally asking me to stand beside him. Not because I paid for it, not because Mom told him to, but because he wanted me there. Still, I didn't answer right away. I texted back just one line, Saturday.noon. My place, the restaurant, no address, no directions. If they didn't know where it was, they could look it up. I wasn't hiding anymore. The place I picked was my flagship location, waterfront views, custom-designed interior, Michelin-starred chef in the kitchen, the kind of space you don't stumble into by accident, and I wanted them to see it, all of it. Not to gloat. Not really. But because they needed to know. This wasn't luck. This wasn't some fluke win. This was mine. Built from the ground up. Quietly. While they all thought I was still stuck in neutral, Saturday was 3 days away. Plenty of time for them to squirm, to run through every version of what they might say. But I wasn't nervous. I'd already lived through the worst of it. They could bring their apologies, their explanations, their regret. I'd bring the bill and the view. Saturday arrived clear and bright, the kind of day that made the harbor view from my restaurant look like something out of a magazine. I'd reserved the private dining room upstairs, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, polished walnut floors, and a long glass table that shimmered beneath custom lighting. I wanted the atmosphere to speak before I ever said a word. They arrived a few minutes late. Nathan came in first, looking sheepish in a navy blazer that didn't quite sit right. Laura followed close behind, holding his hand but glancing around like she wasn't sure if they'd walked into a restaurant or a reckoning. My parents were last, Mom in pearls, Dad in an ironed shirt I hadn't seen him wear since someone else's retirement party. They all stopped just inside the door. "You own this place?" my mom asked, her voice too quiet. "Yeah," I said, standing to greet them. "This is mine." They sat down slowly, like people unsure if the chairs were really for them. The server brought out the starters, crab cakes, duck spring rolls, and a house-made sourdough with whipped honey butter. Nobody touched anything right away. Dad cleared his throat first. "We didn't know, Marcus," he said, "about all this. The businesses, the money, any of it." "That was the point," I said. Mom pressed her napkin into her lap like it had insulted her. "We thought you were still figuring things out." "I was," I said, "and then I figured it out without any of you." Silence. Laura looked down. Nathan picked at the corner of his plate. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Really? I know I handled things wrong. I didn't know the money came from you. I didn't know what you'd built. I always saw you as the guy who dropped out, who drifted." "Because that's what everyone kept saying," I replied, "and you never questioned it." He nodded. "You're right, I didn't. I should have." Laura added softly, "We judged you for not fitting a mold, and now I see you've built your own." I nodded slowly but didn't respond. Then Mom finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "We were wrong. We thought success looked a certain way. Degrees, suits, corner offices. We never thought to look at what you were really doing." Dad looked up. "But we see it now, and we're proud of you." That hit harder than I expected. Not because I needed it, I didn't, but because it felt honest. Nathan leaned forward. "I want you to be my best man. I mean it." I let the silence hang a moment longer. Then I nodded once. "All right." They exhaled, all at once, like they'd been holding their breath for weeks. Lunch went on. Laughter started to creep back in. Conversation loosened. But the view stayed the same, wide open, quiet, clear. That day wasn't about food or money or revenge. It was about standing in the life I built and watching the people who once looked down on me finally look up. Not because I demanded it, but because they saw me, really saw me, for the first time. 3 weeks later, the wedding day arrived. And for the first time in years, I walked into a family event not as the black sheep, but as someone they finally understood belonged there. The venue was one of mine, not the grandest, but still top tier. Glass walls, soft amber lighting, views of the hills just past the vineyard. Laura had gone with understated elegance. White roses, navy linens, gold trim. It looked like something from a bridal magazine, the kind people tear pages from and pin to vision boards. And every piece of it, from the imported wine down to the hand-folded menus, ran through my businesses. I showed up in a charcoal gray suit, clean cut, polished, just enough to quiet the whispers before they started. Not that it stopped them entirely. I heard a few as I walked through the door. "Isn't that Nathan's brother? I heard he paid for the last venue and owns this one. I thought he was some kind of mechanic." I let them talk. I had nothing to prove anymore. The ceremony went smoothly. Laura looked beautiful. Nathan held it together. Mom cried. Dad stood stiff and proud, like someone trying not to show emotion, but losing the fight. Afterward, during the reception, guests swirled between the dance floor and the long banquet tables while a jazz trio played by the fountain. I stayed mostly quiet, sipping my drink and watching it all unfold. Then, just before dessert, The DJ called for the best man's toast. I stepped up to the mic. "Evening, everyone," I said. "I'm Marcus, Nathan's older brother." I paused, letting that settle. A few people turned fully in their seats. I've known Nathan his whole life. When we were kids, he used to follow me around everywhere. I was the big brother, the one he looked up to, the one he wanted to be. A quiet laugh rolled through the room. Nathan smiled at the floor. Then, somewhere along the way, that flipped. He got older. I took some detours in life. He stopped following, stopped asking, and I don't blame him, because for a while, I wasn't someone worth looking up to. I let the silence stretch. But here's the thing about family. It isn't just about who claps for you at your best. It's about who sees you at your worst and still believes there's more. And sometimes it takes losing everything, or nearly everything, to remind people of what you bring to the table. I looked at Nathan. Today isn't about who I used to be. And it's not about money or venues or who paid for what. It's about growth. About two people who are choosing to build something together. That's what success really looks like. Building something that lasts. I raise my glass to Nathan and Laura. May, what you build be stronger than what anyone else expects. The room clapped. Nathan looked at me with something different in his eyes. Not guilt, not pride, just respect. Real, earned respect. Later, as the night wound down and the music faded, he pulled me into a hug. "Thanks," he said. "Not just for all this, for sticking with me. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like I was hugging a relative. It felt like I was hugging my brother again." The wedding wrapped up just after 10. Most of the guests had trickled out by then, full and tipsy, carrying leftover slices of cake in little gold boxes. I stayed behind to help the staff close up. Though I barely lifted a finger, my team had it down to a science. I was standing out on the terrace when I heard the sliding door open behind me. Dad stepped out, hands in his pockets. He looked out over the vineyard like he wasn't sure how to start. "Beautiful place," he said after a moment. "Didn't realize this was yours." I nodded. "One of several." He gave a low, tired chuckle, then turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." He hesitated, then said, "Why didn't you just tell us?" I looked at him. He didn't sound angry, just confused, almost regretful. "You mean about the businesses?" "All of it," he said. "The money, the success, this whole world you built. Why keep it hidden?" I shrugged, still watching the dark hills. "Because if I had told you, you would have just seen the money, not me." He didn't respond. "I wanted respect," I continued. "Not because of what I owned, but because of who I was. And I knew if I flashed a bank account or a title, it'd change the way you talked to me. But not because anything about me had changed, just the number at the bottom of a spreadsheet." He was quiet for a long time. Then finally he said, "We failed you." I turned to look at him. "But you didn't fail us," he added, his voice barely above a whisper. "You did right by all of us, even when we didn't deserve it." That landed heavier than I expected. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, a simple, rough gesture. "I'm proud of you, not for the suits, not for the buildings, for sticking to your word, for standing on your own." I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. Later that night, after I got home and kicked off my shoes, a text lit up on my phone. It was from Nathan. "Nathan, thanks for everything. I'm lucky to have you as a brother. And you know what? For the first time in a long while, I actually felt like one." By Monday morning, the wedding photos were everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, even tagged in a few by vendors I technically owned. There I was in the background of more than a dozen pictures, laughing with Nathan, raising a glass during the toast, standing beside him in a perfectly tailored suit as he kissed his new wife. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from Mom, Dad, Laura. Nathan, Dad. "Dinner this week, just us, no drama." Laura, "Thank you for everything. You saved our wedding." Mom, "We're thinking Italian on Thursday. Let us know what works." I hadn't decided yet, but I smiled reading them. I stood by the window of my condo, coffee in hand, watching the skyline come to life. Same view as always. Steel, light, the low hum of traffic. But something about it felt different now. Lighter, People used to say I was hard to reach, that I kept to myself too much. But the truth was, I wasn't hiding. I was building, quietly, patiently. While they all assumed I was drifting, I was stacking brick after brick into something solid. They thought I had something to prove. I didn't. I didn't need a wedding toast to validate my choices, or an apology dinner to fix old wounds. But I took both because it wasn't about pride anymore. It was about care, real care, the kind that shows up even when people don't clap for you, even when they don't understand what you're doing. And maybe now, just maybe, they were starting to understand. The black sheep didn't just find his way back to the flock. He built the damn fence, and this time, they were the ones asking to come in.